Hannah, you recently wrote a piece for SNY.TV on Francisco Lindor's elite ability to adjust to pitchers within games. Can you tell us about what you learned from him?
Yeah, so this was a piece that was based on some research done over at Baseball Prospectus. They were trying to look at the times through the order penalty that pitchers suffer from the batter's perspective. So we all know at this point that one of the reasons starters don't go as deep into games is because there's all this research showing that the third time they face a lineup, they do a lot less well. The batters are get the advantage. So starters get pulled. But over at BP, they wanted to look at kind of who amongst the batters do the best the third time through, who is really good at making that adjustment that we know is able to be made because we see it from the pitcher side. And so they broke it out by individual players to see who improves the most first time seeing a starting pitcher versus third time. And they found that last year, at least, Francisco Lindor, best in the majors at this. Also worth noting, Juan Soto was third, Brandon Nimmo was 10th. And so I talked to Lindor about this. First of all, I asked him if he knew this, and he didn't. In fact, initially, he thought that I was talking about the idea of getting better the more times you see a pitcher over the course of the season. And he was like, I do feel more comfortable. And he pointed to last year at the end of the year when they faced the Milwaukee Brewers at the end of the regular season. And then again, really, really quickly in the postseason. He was like, I felt so much more comfortable. And that made me think, well, maybe that explains a little bit of why Francisco Lindor tends to get off to a slow start and then get better as the season goes on. He feels more comfortable when he's seeing these guys a second or third time over the course of the season, but also sort of within a game. And he was talking about all the things that you can't prepare for. So what's interesting about this is we have a lot of technology to allow guys to prepare, not just, notes and heat charts and all that, but they have this fancy traject arc that's supposed to perfectly replicate pitchers' arsenals. And so I asked specifically about that, like, if you can do that pregame, doesn't that kind of close the gap? And he was pointing to all the things, whether it's the weather or how a guy's particular pitches are moving in that day or how a catcher is setting up, even how the infield defense is playing you that you don't necessarily know until you get into a game. And then we saw this yesterday. He made 2 outs against the Marlins starter who was really, really good, and then had the first hit to break up the no-hitter yesterday. And you saw him sort of adjust and go up the middle there. That's a really good skill, not just for him, but for the rest of the lineup. I mean, one of the things that if you watch a lot of Mets games is Francisco Lindor is a guy who's often talking to the other hitters. He's going over and sort of putting his glove in front of his face and telling them what he's seeing. And I asked him specifically about that. And I thought this was so interesting. He was saying that the longer he's around the club, the sort of more entrenched he gets with this core of Mets players, the more he learns how guys want that information to be relayed to them and who does and does not want that information, who wants it before they're at bat and who doesn't want it necessarily right before they go up to the plate because they already have an attack plan. He was saying he's learning which guys want to know the shapes of pitches versus the sequence that the pitcher might throw them. And I thought now that the Mets have him and Soto, another guy who's really, really good at this at the top of the lineup, that maybe we will start to see that benefit some of the guys further down in the lineup over the course of the season.
Yeah, and I think that just speaks to the high level of baseball IQ that guys like Lindor and Soto have for them to be able to notice that in game and make the adjustments in real time. But Hannah, a quick follow-up. How valuable is that knowledge for younger hitters on this roster, especially when we're, talking about Vientos and Beatty? How can that knowledge help them?
I imagine that being around someone who's naturally good at that and hearing those little in-game tips will help those guys improve at that over the course of their career, because that is a really valuable skill, because it's the kind of skill that you can't necessarily do anything with from a front office perspective. Like you either in fact, I asked David Stearns, and then I was on SNY last night. I asked Zach Scott, another GM, about this. How do you sort of use this skill to build a team? And he was like, other than putting this guy at the top of the lineup, letting him look at pitches, which you're going to do with Francisco Lindor anyway, because he's just such a good hitter, there's not a lot that a team can necessarily do. It's just a skill that benefits the player. If it benefits the team once they're sort of in game, but this is a tough one to kind of manufacture. It's something that you have to just learn from at bats and maybe from guys who are naturally good at this. You have to kind of learn what it is that you are trying to adjust to, that you can adjust to, that you can get from one particular at bat and take into the next at bat. I asked Lindor specifically, when you're watching your own at bats at back, between at bats. So, guys go back to the dugout and they look at the iPads. What are you looking for? Trying to get a sense of what are these things, these skills that he's kind of taking with him from at bat to at bat. And he said he's not looking for sequencing. He said, I remember the sequencing. I'm looking to see whether I made the right decision, whether or not to swing at certain pitches. So, you're making the decision to swing before the ball gets to the plate. And then he likes to go back and look and see, okay, that's where I thought that ball was going to go whenever it was that I made the snap decision to swing or not. Because he said, I can hit anybody, but if I take the wrong swings, I'm not going to do damage against them. So he wants to make sure that he's not just making contact, but that he's choosing the right pitches to swing at so that when he does make contact, he's doing damage.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes Francisco Lindor one of the best of the best. Make sure you guys all check out Hannah's article on SNY.TV. Some really valuable info in that one.